your seats as our program is about to begin. Thank you. To begin our Day 2 National Leadership Luncheon and Plenary, please welcome to the stage Downey, California City Council member and NALEO's second Vice President, the Honorable Claudia Frometa.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. ¿Cómo estamos? Are we good? It is such a pleasure. I am honored to be here with you all today and see this room filled with esteemed friends, colleagues, and powerful Latino and Latina leaders. I know that our work as policymakers never truly ends, and I want to applaud all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come together this week for the NALEO's 41st annual conference. I'd like to say this is the premier conference. Wouldn't you say that? NALEO es lo mejor, lo mejor. To echo my colleague, Senator Cesar Blanco from earlier this morning, today marks the Juneteenth holiday, a day that holds profound significance for Black Americans in our nation's march for freedom. Juneteenth officially marking the emancipation of African Americans in the United States. And at its core, Juneteenth is a tribute to the resilience and strength of Black America. On behalf of the NALEO and NALEO Educational Fund Boards of Directors, we hope this holiday brings a sense of unity and solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the Black community, while acknowledging the work we still have to do to live up to the ideals of being a nation that offers liberty and justice for all Americans. Yes, an applause for that. As Latinos, even within our own community, we have work to do. ¿Verdad que sí? We have work to do. Yes, including we have work to do to continue making space for all of us, including Afro-Latinos who make up an incredibly vibrant part of the vast diversity of Latino culture. And as we honor Juneteenth, we should remind ourselves that it is okay to talk about the complexities of identity and the intersections of race, ethnicity, and culture. We are stronger because we do that. But whether you identify as Afro-Latino, Black Latino, or something else entirely, let's remember that we're all in this together. And realizing a more equitable and inclusive future will require all of us, todos juntos, to do the work to get there. And now, I would like to take a moment to welcome a special guest today, who has been a part of NALEO for decades. He is a past member of the NALEO Board of Directors, and he's also a recipient of NALEO's Edward Roybal Award for Outstanding Public Service. It is my distinct privilege to introduce you all to the 25th Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, and the first Latino to hold that office in the history of our nation, El Honorable, the Honorable Xavier Becerra.
very much. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. 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 Don't sit, don't sit. Do me a favor. To all the people who are actually working, serving you, and making sure that you have a good time, can we give all the workers a great round of applause? I bet some of you would say, well, that was my father. That was my mother. Because I know that when I drive on the roads of California, that was my father who built them. And we oftentimes forget, because we take for granted, we get to drive on these great highways and not worry. We get to be catered to and served by these wonderful workers, and we don't have to worry. The food will be warm, it'll be tasty, and they'll pick it up. And we don't want to forget them, because that's what drives this country. And so I think each and every one of us are here because probably somewhere in our history, probably not too long ago, we could relate. And so first and foremost, bienvenidos a Las Vegas. Yeah. Uh-oh. Too many of you just got here, because otherwise you'd be clapping a lot louder, because you would have already... You've already had the hospitality of Las Vegas. How has Las Vegas treated you? Okay, are you reciprocating and treating Vegas well and leaving them some good money? Yeah. That was a nervous chuckle I saw, because some of you have left a little too much already. Hey, you're helping out the economy here, so do it and do it well and smile, walk away, okay, walk away, because that saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Sometimes it's all about your money, and it happens that too much of your money will stay in Vegas, so be careful, enjoy. To Claudia, thank you very much for the introduction. By the way, Javier with an X. I was Javier until I turned 5, and then I went to kindergarten, and you know, your parents tell you, lo que te dice tu maestra, tú lo haces. So she gets down to Becerra, and she says, Xavier Becerra, and I said, wait, who's that? I was Xavier until I graduated from high school. When I said, no mas, got to college, I started saying, no, X like an H, Javier. And so I have now had to go through most of my life reminding people Javier is spelled with an H sometimes, and it is Javier, not Xavier. I think my parents did that to me intentionally to, you know, give me some grit and courage. To all of you civic, elected, appointed leaders, thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for thinking it important enough to come to Las Vegas to be part of NALEO, because we need to keep NALEO strong. You are NALEO, I am NALEO. We need to continue to support each other. We need to continue to support NALEO. And so to Arturo Vargas, who has been a dear friend, we were at Stanford together way back. And I have seen him. I got to Congress a little bit before he became the executive director, the CEO of NALEO. We have gone through many journeys together. To our CEO, Arturo Vargas, and his team, thank you much for setting up another successful convention and opportunity for us to break bread and team up and work together as leaders for this great country. Thank you, Arturo. So if you think about Vegas, Las Vegas is a desert area. By the way, Las Vegas means meadowlands or with water. You know, the only way you find water now is if you turn on the faucet in Vegas. But Las Vegas is a place where we see communities thrive. They live on. And it's because Vegas has this sense, this culture of hope, optimism, dreams. You know, that you could come here and make it. And while sometimes they are a little higher in their hopes and dreams than when they leave, it's still a place that people come to all the time. And I would submit to you that right here, right now, in this place, in Bellagio, right here, in this hall, there is more hope, there's more optimism, there is more dreaming than anywhere right now in America. Why? Let me prove to you why. How many of you are the first to serve in your elected or appointed office as a Latina or Latino in your neck of the woods? How many are the first to start your own business? How many of you are the first to be the CEO of a major organization, a business, or an agency? How many of you are the first to graduate and get a college degree? How many of you are the first in your family who have had an opportunity to wear a suit? How many of you are the first in your family to now have gotten that college degree and now see your children go on to get college degrees? There is more reason to be optimistic, to have hope, to dream in this room, and I would bet you then, and this is a place to bet, than anywhere else in America right now, because many of you are living the dream. By the way, do we have any dreamers, actual dreamers in the room? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. See, I'm telling you, I don't lie. I've got the official pin on. I cannot lie. So it is what happens when you are given opportunity. And so here's what I hope you will know. We get to dream not because it's just this unfounded notion that, yeah, there's a dream we're going to. No, talk to the dreamers in this room. They work really hard to be able to dream, to become dreamers. Talk to your families. Talk to the folks who were the first families to come to America, the first migrants. I'm the son of immigrants. My parents, I saw it. It was a lot of hard work. It was always one of those things where you had to keep going. But what I saw was they had optimism always running in their DNA. For some reason, tomorrow would be better. So when my dad would say to me, "Mijo, si me puedo levantar en la mañana e ir a trabajar, es un buen día." And now they get concerned. They can say, "Mijo, trabajas muy duro. You know, you're just working too hard." And my dad, with his calloused hands from being a road construction worker and a farm worker most of his life, I think to myself when he was alive, this is my uniform. His uniform was always stained and dirty and bloody after work. Yet I was one that's working too hard. And you see, that's the thing. There's always this belief, you're just going to get to do better. And so we have optimism in our DNA. So we're going to work hard. We're going to build. And we're going to get to dream. But let no one tell you that when we roll that 7, and this is the place where you roll 7s, when we roll the 7, that it was luck. You please tell everybody, and especially the dreamers, you tell people, you earned your luck. You worked hard for your luck. You have gotten your luck because you earned it. And so, after years of toil and sacrifice, and we finally roll that 7, and they tell us, wow, you are lucky. You are lucky to have 3 daughters who have gone to some of the best universities, Stanford, and Yale. Wow, you are lucky. No, no, no. I worked really hard. My wife, a physician, worked really hard so we could teach our daughters what they could do. But then they earned it. They're the ones that got the grades. They're the ones that earned the acceptance. They're the ones that graduated. They're the ones that passed the bar exam. They're the ones who showed that when they rolled their 7, they earned it. And that's what we want, is for everyone to know we represent folks who have earned their chance in America. And so I say to each and every one of you, I know your luck. I know how hard you work for your luck. And I'm here to tell you on behalf of the president who put more Latinos in a cabinet of a president than any before in the history of America, that he knows your luck, and he knows you have earned it. So it was not luck that yesterday the president said to all those spouses of U.S. citizens who don't have documents, who are undocumented, and have not been able to adjust their status, this president is going to make it possible for you to adjust your status and live in this country with full documentation. The president knows your luck, and that's why he empowered me as Secretary of HHS to say to all those dreamers that you should not be without health insurance. And so today, under President Biden's leadership, they now qualify for Obamacare health care coverage under the marketplaces. This is the president who has put more Latinos to work than any in the history of the country. We are seeing the lowest rates of unemployment for Latinos ever seen before. We are seeing the highest number of Latinos who have their own health insurance, who could then say, my daughter needs to go to the hospital, and say, I'm going to go because I know I won't go bankrupt because I have health insurance. The largest number of Latinos in the history of the country today have health insurance under this president of the United States. And so on and on, I want you to know that we know about your luck. And we know how hard you worked for your luck. And we know that we're speaking in a room filled with optimism about how you're helping to ensure that people who work hard for their luck continue to have that chance. We have an obligation. This is what NALEO represents. We're here as leaders to make sure everyone who worked hard gets their chance to roll their 7. That's why we're here. You leave a little bit of money in Vegas, but remember, it's the luck that we take every day back home that's going to let us succeed and roll lots of 7s in the future. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making NALEO so great. We will see you on the card table. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you, Honorable Javier Becerra. Gracias, Honorable Javier Becerra, for those remarks and your long-time commitment to our NALEO familia and to our country. Please, once again, join me in giving Secretary Becerra another round of applause. And now, on behalf of NALEO's 41st Annual Conference, I'd like to give a special shout out to today's luncheon host, Toyota. Can we please give him a round of applause? Here to provide remarks on their behalf is Ms. Nicolina Hernandez, Regional Director of State Government Affairs. Please put your hands together for Ms. Hernandez.
Buenas tardes. Happy Juneteenth. On behalf of Toyota, welcome to NALEO's 41st Annual Conference. My name is Nicolina Hernandez. I am Toyota's Regional Director of State Government Affairs. And I think the first thing I'd want to say is congratulations to NALEO CEO Arturo Vargas and his outstanding team, Bianca and everybody, for another completely sold-out event. Un aplauso. And this underscores something really important. We are raising the profile of Latino constituencies across this country. Arturo, this conference is now recognized as the nation's Latino political convention. It is a must-stop for both candidates and current officials to speak directly to the Latino electorate. Congratulations, Naleo. Toyota is proud of our long-standing partnership with Naleo as part of our commitment to diversity and inclusion. And how we do this is through respect for people, because that is one of our core values and one of my core values. We have been in the United States since the late 1950s, and through making cars and kaizen, which is Japanese for continuous improvement, we have found that having a wide array of perspectives and viewpoints leads to greater innovation and creativity. Case in point, the 2024 Prius Prime, it is a very sleek model upgrade, it's fuel efficient, and it won the Greenest Car Award. We're very proud of that. Respect also results in happier team members who feel accepted, like they belong, and have a safe space at Toyota. And we know we must also do our part to broaden inclusion, because when all communities have an equal opportunity to succeed, all of society wins. And part of leveling that playing field is access to political power, and that's where Naleo comes in. It is so encouraging to hear that every year the ranks of Latino elected and appointed officials in all levels of government increase. In fact, Naleo now has over 7,000 members, which is phenomenal. But we can do better. We can do better because Latinos make up 19% of the total US population today and projected to reach a quarter, 25% by the middle of the century. So yes, our voices matter and equal representation matters. This means we need more Latinos to run for office. We need more Latinos to get engaged in civic affairs, and of course, more Latinos to exercise their right to vote. It's the only way that our opinions will be heard. And this can't be more true in such an important election year. Briefly, if you'll indulge me, I just want to share a little bit about myself and follow the theme that we've been hearing from our speakers today in terms of being the first and also giving back to our communities. I am Toyota's first Latina regional director in this role. I was the first... Hold on, there's more. I was the first Latina regional director for Toyota. I'm the first Latina vice chair and past chair of the City of Sacramento Planning and Design Commission appointed by the mayor. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. I went to Sanger High in Fresno Valley, all the way to Carleton College in Minnesota, so shout out to my Central Valley people and my Midwestern folks. And I have been the first many times, and often the only Latina at many decision-making tables throughout my education and my career. And we also heard this from many speakers yesterday and today, speakers who are breaking the glass ceiling, and I know there are a lot of folks in this room who are breaking the glass ceiling. So, what can we do to continue supporting Latino representation? If you're not already doing so, I would ask that you build a Latino bench. Who will succeed you? Today, we're still hearing folks say, I was the first, or I am the first. Build a bench so that we strengthen the next generation of leaders who will amplify the Latino community's needs and support the Naleo mission. I hope you guys enjoy the conference. Thank you so much. Y vayamos juntos.
Thank you again to today's luncheon host, Toyota, and Ms. Nicolina Hernandez for those remarks. Remarkable being the first. Are you enjoying your lunch? ¿Sí? ¿Está rica la comida? And now, joining us for a special presentation, I'd like to invite Clark County Commissioner James Gibson, as well as Naleo President Junior Maldonado, Naleo Educational Fund Chair Alejandra Sotelo Solis, and Naleo CEO Arturo Vargas to join me on stage.
Thank you very much. Hola, Naleo. Soy el comisionado Jim Gibson y bienvenidos a Bellagio, ubicado en el corazón del Distrito G, al que orgullosamente represento. Estoy muy feliz de compartir con todos ustedes hoy. And I would say, not that I would ever disagree with the secretary, but you should, I would say, permanezcan when you go into those casinos. We're really excited to present Naleo with a key to the Las Vegas Strip. The key will open any lock you approach. And a proclamation officially making today Naleo Day across Clark County, Nevada. All of us at Clark County appreciate the great work that the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials has done for the Latino community across our country for over 4 decades, but more importantly, what it has done for all of us who share the benefit of the great leadership, instruction, preparation, and service that is rendered as a consequence of association with you. Your remarkable work not only keeps this community informed, but it also helps foster and develop future leaders, which is especially important, and we've heard some about that today. So congratulations, and thank you again for all the work you do. We hope that you feel welcome to come back frequently. We don't really care how much you leave, just leave what you can. And maybe we'll give you another key if you leave enough. Thank you very much for visiting the sports and entertainment capital of the world. Take care.
Thank you again to Commissioner Gibson. Thank you for making our organization feel so welcome in your vibrant city. This concludes our National Leadership Luncheon program. And now I have the honor of introducing one of our conference's most eagerly anticipated plenaries, addressing the humanitarian crisis at the border and beyond. To kick off this topical discussion, please help me welcome to the stage the U.S. representative from California's 42nd Congressional District, which includes my very own city of Downey, the Honorable Robert Garcia.
Hey everyone, how we doing? Todos bien? It's an honor, of course, to be with all of you here at NALEO. I've been coming to NALEO conferences since I was on the city council, my hometown of Long Beach, California, then as mayor, and then of course now representing not just my city, but also Southeast Los Angeles. I know there's a lot of folks from Cela here. I think we actually have the largest delegation probably here at NALEO. I also want to just thank Arturo and the entire team for their incredible work in putting us all together every single year and this incredible gathering. To Councilmember Fermenta, thank you for your leadership. We know your continued leadership in NALEO in the years ahead. And we're here today to have an important conversation about addressing the humanitarian crisis at the border and beyond. Now, we know that according to projections, there are millions and millions of asylum seekers and migrants in this country who are here in search of a better life. Now, I know that struggle personally. I came here to the US as an immigrant when I was a young child and did not become a US citizen till I was in my early 20s. I remember being at the university in classrooms with my colleagues and friends, looking around and that feeling of not knowing what my future would look like because I did not have citizenship. I know the feeling of being undocumented. We all know, our parents know, our families know the struggle of knowing immigrants who are here, who are just looking to be part of this country, and for so many of our parents, the American dream. And we know the contributions that migrants and immigrants make to our great nation. For those that are also not aware, recently it's been released and noted that immigration will grow our economy at this moment by $7 trillion over the next decade. We also know, and this is facts reported by our Justice Department and police departments across the country, that immigrants are also less likely to commit crimes than natural citizens. Did you all know that? It's also true that right now, the issue of migration, border security, those that are seeking asylum, is at a crossroads of a debate that is both controversial, but also very important for us to have. Before we join and begin our conversation, I also need to note, like the Secretary said, of how important the announcement from President Biden that he made yesterday is going to be to keeping over 500,000 families together across the country. 500,000 families. We should remember that for many young people and kids in this country, you might be a young child born in the United States, and one parent is a citizen, and the other parent is undocumented or does not have any sort of pathways to actually become a resident or a citizen. And the only way for a legal pathway for that other parent would be to actually leave the country in many cases and apply back in their home country. This new executive order keeps families together, and I know that we all are grateful and want to thank the President for that incredible executive order across the country. I'll also remind us that in the immigration debate should ideally always be bipartisan. And I know NALEO is nonpartisan. We all try to work together here from our different perspectives. But I always remind folks that the last most significant immigration reform bill that passed the United States was signed by Ronald Reagan. It was Ronald Reagan that created a pathway for millions across this country to become US citizens. And as we can all probably sense, we have come a long way from that era of bipartisanship to where we are today. And so today, I'm excited to help lead this panel of some incredible women and folks who understand or are on the front lines of the immigration debate, but more importantly, about asylum seekers and migrants who are coming across the border and how our cities are actually having to react to this crisis that we currently have. So please give me a warm welcome as I introduce our panelists. First, Ms. Andrea Flores, who's Vice President of Immigration Policy and Campaigns at Forward.us. Second, Ms. Melissa M. Lopez, who's the Executive Director of Estrella del Paso. And Ms. Marisa Arres, who, one second here, and Ms. Marisa Arres, who is Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Office of Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights in Chicago, Illinois. So let's give them all a round of applause. Well, thank you all, ladies, for your incredible work in the immigration space and the migrant space. You obviously have America's most dedicated Latino and Latina leaders from across the country that are here, which we're very grateful for, who want to hear this important conversation. Ms. Flores, I just wanted to open up so you can just kind of give us some thoughts about where you think we are at this moment.
Sure. So first, it's an honor to be here. My name is Andrea Flores. I'm a native of Las Cruces, New Mexico, so looking out for any New Mexico representatives here. But But I've been in Washington, D.C. now for a long time doing what I try to do, which is represent border community perspective in the federal immigration policy making. So I've had the honor of serving in for President Obama, for President Biden, and in the US Senate working on this issue. And I have to be honest, we're at a real crossroads. So today I'm an immigration advocate. I'm at an organization called Forward.us. We're a bipartisan immigrant rights advocacy organization. We work a lot with the business community to find pragmatic immigration solutions to the current challenge. But when it comes to the border, we are absolutely at a crossroads. The US government, because of really congressional inaction, has had the same set of tools to respond to a rapidly changing global migration crisis since basically 1996, and before that since about 1990. So when you look at the current problem, there have been no federal immigration law updates coming out of Congress to address what is the highest rate of global displacement that we have seen, and our laws are honestly quite ill-equipped to address it. And both parties have tried something very similar. I think both parties have looked at the asylum system, said it's too slow, it's broken, and they've restricted it in different levels. So that has been from when I served under President Obama to President Trump to President Biden. They've been trying the same thing. They say if we restrict asylum, people will stop coming. If that were the solution, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so I think what's important to know is that it's so much bigger than a question about asylum. It's about the different pathways that people who are displaced and people who want to come to the United States, what options do they actually have? And because there has not been a new legal pathway created since 1990, you see that people are using the asylum system, and they're using that because that's their only access point. So I'm really excited to talk to all of you today about this because lawmakers like yourselves and local and state officials now are experiencing this far beyond the border, and Congress really needs to hear from all of you that a creation of legal pathways to take this pressure off of the border is really our best path forward. That's something that hasn't really been tried, except President Biden did experiment and has had a great success creating parole pathways for some of the highest apprehended nationalities, so Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. When he created that option, the crossings from those nationalities went down a significant rate. And those are the kinds of policies we as the United States need to be looking into, expanding and building, and that all of you, I think, should be very interested in using the evidence that we have from that. And because we're not going to get out of this with a new Title 42 or a shutdown or anything else that expects the asylum system to be the fix of this problem.
That's right. And Andrea, and just if you look at both what happened with the president's actions on border security, which we know he just announced a couple weeks ago, and then you marry those with the announcements that he made yesterday around the executive orders, how are those two different policies, how are they kind of creating a path forward for our groups that are on the ground, for organizations in DC? How is that going right now? What do you see the next few months looking like with the work that you're doing?
Sure, so I'll say the announcement yesterday is critical, and it's very related to what I just said about asylum, which is that President Biden is having to address a very broken system that has very few options for the long time undocumented. And so he created this very smart policy that was based off of a policy that actually under the Bush administration helped military families, help their undocumented family members adjust their status in the US, so that way when their family member was serving, they didn't have to worry about their mom or their dad being deported. So he's building off of something that is bipartisan, that has been done before. It's called parole in place. And he's doing what he can without Congress to provide some relief to the long time undocumented. And similarly with his latest border executive order, he's, I also think, doing what he can to reduce some pressure. I know that cities have had to take on a burden of sort of creating a response to new arrivals at a rate we have not seen before. And that's because there's not a federal policy sort of mechanism to welcome new arrivals into cities in any orderly way. People leave custody at the border. They end up in wherever they are able to either get a bus ticket or a plane ticket to, and if they're lucky, they have work authorization. They probably don't. That's all the result of our broken immigration system. People should probably have work permits when they come in, right? Congress should probably make that easier. So I think President Biden is doing a lot of what he can do with his authority, but Congress needs to work, and the two parties have to work together again on this.
I agree. Do we know any Congress people who can help this stuff?
We'll be following up.
I agree. No, I agree. Let me go to Marissa. Marissa, so I think we've all probably been following what's happening in cities across the United States where you have migrants that are coming in. You're reading about stories in New York and Chicago, what's happening here in parts of California and the West Coast, but it's also impacting cities large and small. And I think that's a reality, particularly for groups that are on the ground and for cities that are having to absorb and take on a large challenge, particularly in a way that needs to be humane. And so, Marissa, with your experience in Chicago and the office, where is the state of the issue right now in the city of Chicago, and how do you see this unfolding across the country?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisa. Thank you so much for having me. I think a lot of what's been happening in terms of welcoming people humanely in the city of Chicago has been done a lot with partnerships, both private and public. And so what we've been doing a lot is really partnering with community-based organizations and the state and the county using a strategic partnership model where we started meeting weekly in the fall to really come together to make strategic decisions that kind of just deal with everything from where new arrivals first arrive to the city. It's a resettlement. And so community-based organizations are a huge, huge part of that, and they're really integrated in the entire process. And so I think that that's what we're really gonna start seeing across the country, is really looking at grassroots, people who are on the ground, a lot of mutual aid folks who you've been seeing popping up. We've been seeing a lot of ghost buses in the city of Chicago because we put a bus ordinance that said you needed to give us 48 hours notice so that people would be welcomed humanely during hours of operation of our landing zone and our intake center. That has not been the case, and they've been dropped off in other municipalities. And so what we've been doing has been partnering with those municipalities. They've been buying train tickets for people to arrive to the city of Chicago, to our landing zone, to be able to go through our intake center. And then that also has some diversion where if people need to be reunited with families, because a lot of people don't even want to be in Chicago, to be honest. That's not where they intended to be. They just ended up there. They really want to reconnect with family or friends that they have. And so we have community organizations like Catholic Charities and New Life Centers who are really doing phenomenal work in terms of reuniting families. So.
Amazing work. And can I ask you two things? One is, do you expect, and I think, and we probably have all diverse opinions about some of the implementation policies that the White House has made as it relates to border security. And a lot of us, I certainly have strong opinions, and I know a lot of us here do as well. But can I ask you, do you expect that the recent actions that the president has taken in the administration on the border security piece, not the piece that just happened yesterday, will impact the work that all of you are doing? What's the expectation that you're all planning for in the kind of in the weeks and months ahead?
So part of that strategic plan where we've been meeting weekly has been to talk about a possible surge and what that looks like, because we knew that people are starting to arrive to our airports, to our Greyhound stations. They're walking up to our landing zone. They're no longer arriving just on buses. And so what we've been seeing, we've been partnering with the city's, our OEMC, which is our Office of Emergency Management, the county's Office of Emergency Management, and the state's Office of Emergency Management to say if there is a surge that does happen and we do see this large influx, what does that look like, right? And so with that bus ordinance, we did start seeing a trickle down of those buses arriving to the city of Chicago, but in the last week or so, we have started to see that uptick as well.
Do you expect, so you're seeing the uptick, but do you expect that that will plateau some in the weeks or months ahead?
To be honest, I really don't think so, and the reason being just because there were some limitations put on the border does not mean that people are not still going to find other avenues in order to make it to Chicago, which is what we've been saying.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me transition to Melissa Ms. Lopez, thank you for being here. This, city of El Paso, we know, sits across the border, of course, from Ciudad Juarez, which is obviously the communities are interlinked. I mean, many even argue it's one community. We know that you're on the front line of the crisis. Can you give us from your perspective what your nonprofit Estrella del Paso is doing to address this similar concern of what's happening in Chicago, but also in a much different way, and you are right across the border. How are you guys reacting to the changes, the policy changes that are happening, and the real humane decisions you're all making every single day as migrants are coming across the border?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, to Naleo for having me. Yes, on the El Paso Juarez border, which for those that don't know is, I believe, the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. It's a huge area for people to enter the country. And one of the things that we learned, and I guess I should say first, Estrella del Paso, we are a legal services nonprofit. So we are focused on helping those individuals that are arriving legalize their status, apply for a work permit, apply for asylum, so whatever the case might be. And we served in 2023 just over 57,000 people through our organization. So the need is vast. But one of the things that we have learned as a community, actually going back to 2016, is that there's a real need for both local government and NGOs to work together. This is not a process that works in a bubble. We all have to collaborate together in order to welcome these individuals that are coming in, because one of the things, related to what Andrea was saying is that people keep asking, is the flow going to stem? And the reality is that the programs that started under President Trump that shut down the border during COVID, those policies, all they did was, put the stopper in the bathtub, to use an analogy. And so that bathtub has been filling up over the course of the last, 6 to 8 years. And so when you have people who are displaced from their home countries and can't go back, once you pull that stopper open, there are lots of people trying to fit through that very small, hole in the tub to try to get into the United States. And so what we have learned is that we have to work with our local government. We work very closely with the County of El Paso. Commissioner Stout is in the room with us today, and he has been pivotal in getting the Office of New Americans started in El Paso, which has been really critical in helping us create a system to where we know where people are going, what cities they're going to, and we're able to more easily manage. We've also been working with local NGOs to provide work permit workshops so that people, before they leave El Paso, they already have an application for their work permit in place. And I think over the course of the last few weeks, we've served nearly 1,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. So those are 1,000 people that are going to be arriving in Chicago or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., with hopefully a work permit to come in just a few weeks.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that's been interesting with all the folks that are coming across the border, and I've learned this, so I was telling Andrea also, I'm a freshman member of Congress, just got to Congress, and I'm on Homeland Security, and one of the first briefings that I had was a study of who actually is coming across the border, which I think there's a lot of misconceptions about who is actually coming across the border. Andrea, will you share with Naleo and everyone here who is actually coming across? What do those demographics actually look like, and from where in the world are folks coming from?
Sure. So since I like to kind of capstone this and say in the last 10 years, since 2014, when we saw a major sort of surge of unaccompanied children, that migration was mainly coming from Central America, from the Northern Triangle countries, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, and for several years, that was about the same population. And so this is, I think one thing that's frustrating about the current debate about the border is it's also a huge foreign policy issue. And so because those nationalities were what they were, there had been diplomatic negotiations and arrangements made that made the processing of them a little bit faster at the border, because people forget when you hear border numbers, what that really means is that a CBP officer is taking a certain amount of time for each one of those people, and that processing takes time, and each different nationality takes a different amount of time, and some people can be put, maybe if they don't have a legal claim, can be removed quickly. Other people cannot be removed quickly. They may not ever be able to be removed because their country won't accept them. So I always like to get away from just like there's 1,500 people and say those 1,500 people could all be treated radically differently, which gets to your question of in the last, really since under the Trump administration, Venezuela has been in absolute political collapse. And there are 8 million people displaced in this hemisphere, and they are one of the top 5 nationalities that we now see. Venezuela does not take back removal flights. And what I think Venezuela is also like a really interesting lesson for, I think, federal policymakers, because they weren't just originally displaced and then started coming to the United States. They were displaced, they had some form of temporary status in Colombia. But because immigrant integration, and I'm thinking about all of the communities here who have Office of New Americans and how important that is, Colombia didn't do maybe the best job at integrating and making sure they were getting jobs and that they could stay there. So then they get pushed further up the migratory route. They go through Mexico, they go through the Darien, and countries have responded in some ways by cutting off their visas. But if you can't go back home, every single country actually needs to work to integrate those populations. And because that hasn't happened all the way up, the US continues to see Venezuelans at a very high rate at the border, which is why going back to one of Biden's, I think, most successful border policies was creating a legal pathway for them so they didn't have to come to the border.
And before you keep going, on the Venezuela question, so interestingly enough, we used to have maybe, hundreds and thousands of Venezuelans coming, then tens of thousands, and now we've had over hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans coming from across the border and other places across South America. And so the Venezuela question and that foreign policy implication is so important and tied directly back to US foreign policy, especially around the way that we impact sanctions, the way that we impact the economies of these countries, which is why I think, and myself and many others, and I know many of you, believe that we also have to rethink how the United States imposes sanctions in South America and in our Latin American neighbors, because it actually oftentimes causes much more damage to those countries and the people, not just the government and those in charge, but the people of those countries, and then the impacts of the United States. But let's continue on who besides Venezuela, are coming to the U.S.
I think the other thing is going back to my earlier point, which is that because the visas, the family and employment-based visa system is backlogged, and so we're now seeing also people coming from really around the world, an uptick in Chinese nationals at the border, uptick in Indian nationals at the border, and with social media and kind of the world becoming smaller, more general, you see a whole new industry of people outside of our own hemisphere now also using our asylum system to come. Now, in some cases, I've had a lot of people say, well, wasn't it easier when it was just Mexicans? And I say, right now we have Mexican asylum seekers coming. They just had their elections, and they had over 30 assassinations of local candidates in Mexico. There is still, and that's why I go back to asylum, there's still a need to protect people who are being politically persecuted, even from Mexico. So it's complex. I don't think any president can succeed on this issue with the laws we have on the books, right? No one can. They need new tools. And so as the demographics get more complex, it necessitates new visas, a conversation about the kind of new immigration we want, and how we want to protect people who are fleeing persecution.
No, and I think that's really interesting to note. I mean, we're seeing so many more migrants from Asia, from China, from Africa, from India, from all these places. It's not just Mexicanos anymore, It's a really diverse people from around the world. And one thing I'll add, which I think is really important for everyone here, is there's a conversation, an important one about, oftentimes we hear in the media about these migrants and crime or around drug trafficking. As a note, more drugs come into the United States from legal points of entry than do from migrants in the border. And so vast majority of like illegal fentanyl or other drugs that are coming in are actually being smuggled by American citizens than are by migrants coming at the border. And I think it's an important note for us to also know as we're having this debate. Let me just also move on to Marissa. Marissa, with the work that you're doing, which is really, really complex, and we have also seen stories of pushback in communities. So you're helping migrants, you're on the ground, and maybe it's other communities that are allied communities. Maybe it's just people that see migrants and already feel like we have enough challenge within our cities. how are you navigating and communicating with other communities about the need to assist these migrants?
So that's definitely been a difficulty that the city of Chicago has seen because of the resettlement part of it. When you look at where affordable housing units are, Chicago's one of the most segregated cities in the world, or I'm sorry, in the country, right? And so when you look at where affordable housing is, that tends to be in Black neighborhoods. And so what we've been seeing has been definitely a lot of tension with, like you said, allied communities, but also Black communities. And so what we've been doing has been partnering with, again, community-based organizations, where one of them has been doing welcome parties where when new arrivals, and there's a lot of new arrivals that are resettled in an area, they've been having welcome breakfasts, particularly with the local elected officials, to invite them to say, these are gonna be your constituents as well, right? Like, they're moving into your area, and so that's what we've been doing. We've also been holding community briefings we started weekly, now they're bi-weekly, to let people know and be transparent about what is the work that we're doing. And we've created that space so that when communities say, we're missing X, Y, and Z, we need additional resources, we can pivot to say, how can we support you all while supporting new arrivals as well? And that's part of what we do in the office, is when we get cases that are extenuating circumstances, we do our best to try to partner with somebody else to find those resources to be able to support those different communities.
And do you have any advice for local elected officials? Because I've heard this too. I think you hear, well, we have people to take care of in our own country, or we need more support. We have people that are experiencing homelessness that need direct support from our cities or our states, and yet we have migrants coming in also needing service, right? What type of messaging, and do you have any advice to give to elected officials to answer those questions or to have meaningful conversation?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I can say is to listen, because all of that is very true. There's a lot of hurt there because there's been a lot of disinvestment and disenfranchisement of a bunch of different communities, right? And so part of that is doing listening sessions. Part of that is holding meetings with CBOs, because they're the ones that are on the ground who are really hearing the pain and also the lack of resources in these different communities. I would also say that, part of it is figuring out how to remove obstacles and remove barriers for more people to be able to access those resources, so that it's not one particular population that's being supported and helped, or one particular population that's being able to access that resource.
Thank you very much for that. Let me also, Melissa, let me ask you, similarly, the challenge I know in El Paso is immense. And I've heard stories coming out of El Paso about what was happening on the ground and the impact to the nonprofits on the ground. What advice would you have to policymakers about working with nonprofits and the importance of nonprofits being partners with our governments and cities and localities?
I think the importance really local government is critical, as are nonprofits, to making the system work. The reality is the model in the city of Chicago works so well because it is a partnership. We, as nonprofits, know sectors of the community and service a sector of the community that likely local government doesn't necessarily touch on a regular basis. And also, a lot of nonprofits have a broader scope in terms of what they're doing. So, for example, your local food pantries, they don't just serve the immigrant population, right? They serve those that are in need of food more generally, but they can also add a component of serving the immigrant population should that be needed. It's also true for the unhoused, right? So our homeless community shelters, especially in El Paso, have really stepped up and added, this immigrant population to the people that they're already serving. And what we have found in El Paso is that there is not a lack of, certainly we will always take more resources. We will always take more donations. We won't say no when somebody's offering us resources. But the reality is that for so many of us, we figure out ways to make it work. And sometimes that's to our detriment, but the reality is that we're so committed to serving this population that we can find ample ways to really make it work if we work together. the city and the county bring certain resources, the NGOs bring resources, and collectively we can really make this a system that serves this particular population. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings. And I think that that's what drives all of us, is that we're not looking at the numbers, we're not looking at the statistics, we're not looking at where they come from. We're looking at the fact that I have a mom and her young child, coming home from the airport, coming home from out of town recently. I saw a mom and her 3-year-old child waiting at the airport for a flight. Well, their flight wasn't until the next day, and that little boy was sleeping on a concrete bench. And it absolutely broke my heart. I just could not believe that this was the circumstance that they were living in. And so I'm incredibly blessed and was able to pull some money out of my pocket and give them money for a hotel for the night. But those are the moments that drive, seeing those things continue to happen is what drives the work, because in those moments, that's the reminder of why we have to continue to fight the way that we do. And as the immigration attorney, I can't let it slip. I want to say, Andrea mentioned earlier about the broken immigration system. Just for context, if you are the sibling of somebody from the Philippines, your family member must have filed an application on your behalf in the 1980s for you today to be able to enter the country lawfully. So when people talk about, well, just do it the right way, the legal way, that's what our immigration system is currently. And I do have to say one other thing. Unfortunately, I have to leave to catch a flight, so I'm going to pop off stage here in a moment. But if I don't get another chance to say anything else, thank you all so much for your attention, and I hope that this panel has been an opportunity for you all to learn, and certainly welcome to call on us in El Paso. We're happy to share whatever lessons we've learned.
Absolutely, and I know. And we're gonna keep us on time so you get to your flight. We just got a few minutes left. Just briefly, also, Melissa, can you just also comment on any advice for them, for our leaders, about how we can message this idea of migrants coming in and the resource question? Do you also have any advice you can share on that?
Yeah, I think I think that's where the NGOs do really come into play, because again, as NGOs, our focus is often limited to a certain type of population, not a population per se. So again, when you're talking about your food pantries are there for the community at large. They don't pay attention to what the immigration status is of the individual. But one thing I will say is that, it is important to draw on your community resources, but it's also important to support your community resources. There are a lot of NGOs that use different methods of fundraising. We use our social media. We also need you to help uplift those things when we're trying to raise money to do this work. That's when it's really important for elected officials. But I think the conversations have to start before the crisis begins. And I think that that's one thing that we've done well in El Paso, is we have a very good collaborative community. I know a lot of our El Paso delegation is here, and I'm really proud of us as a community and the work that we do to establish those relationships and know who those people are before we find ourselves in the thick of an emergency. And I think that's the key piece. You have to know who's in your community. You have to know who's doing what in your community, because at the end of the day, you will need them one day. But if you don't know who to call, it's going to be a lot tougher to get things done. Not only that, but when there's a mutual relationship, there's incentive on both sides to really work together and make things happen.
Thank you for that. And we have time for one more. I'm gonna have just one more question for each of our panelists, and we'll end right on time. We'll get us back on track. And we can start, Melissa. We can go back down this way.
Sure.
If there's one change that you think either we could make collectively as a country, or that our policymakers can make to actually assist in the humanitarian crisis that's happening in our country, what would that be?
As hard as this is to say, but we were sitting at the table before we got on stage, and I have to say, you have to take politics out of the conversation. This has to be a conversation about what's happening in our community and what can we do regardless of how you feel about the issue, because at the end of the day, no matter which political party you're part of, there's a need in the community that infects the entire community. And so I think you have to take politics out of the equation, and you have to be able to have these discussions. The way that NALEO, I think why it was formed is to have conversations about issues that don't delve into the politics of it. So focus on the facts, focus on the resources, and keep politics out of the conversation.
Thank you. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you, Melissa, for that. And Marissa, what about you?
I would say, kind of just piggybacking off of that not to forget that we're talking about human beings and babies and people, right? And when you're talking about that and you're taking politics out of it, I'll just share a really quick story. My parents were immigrants, and we had just supported a shelter opening in Chicago that is led by a nonprofit, and they're completely taking it on by themselves. And there was a mother who had a child who was less than a year old, and she looked at me and asked me where I was born, where my family was from, and then she asked me where I was born, where my family was from, where they came from, what their story was, essentially, right? And I looked at her and I looked at her son and I said, to be honest, my father was your son's age when he came here. And she got really teary-eyed and she was like, that makes me so hopeful because I'm looking at you and looking at my son, and I know that this is gonna change future generations in my family, right? So I wanna share that story with you all to remember that that is the focal point in why we're all doing the work that we're doing to affect the lives of families and of babies.
Great, thank you very much. And finally to Andrea, any final advice about how folks can be engaged or change that needs to be made?
Sure. So one, I agree with all of that. And I think the part of me that's been in DC too long has a very specific request, which is that regardless of what party you're in, we do have to explain to the American people why immigration is beneficial to the United States again. And I think that has been very lost in the conversation because we already have one US state, the state of Vermont, that is in rural population decline, meaning that they're going to be facing labor economic shortages, they're not going to be able to fill jobs, they're not going to have caregivers, and they have key industries there that are going to start suffering in the near term. And so if people don't understand that the US is so lucky right now to be an aging nation where people still want to migrate across continents to be here, we have to be able to channel that, and we have to build the legal pathways to channel that. But as I think leaders, you have to explain to the public, they don't trust our immigration system right now, and I understand why. If you're just experiencing it from, whether you're in New York or Chicago and experiencing it anew, or you're at the border, growing up in border communities, it's always sort of been, in many ways, a state of emergency, right? It's why I wanted to work on this issue. But if you're not telling the story of why we benefit from those new arrivals, then we're never gonna get out of this. And we just need another foreign policy component. Is my last thing I'll say is that migration is being weaponized in countries all around the world. It's not just us. And so it's really a question of how diverse and how sturdy is the idea of American citizenship. And that's what's being tested. And so I think if we continue to be confident and bold in our foreign policy approach of saying we do welcome immigrants, we're not afraid of diversity, we are going to combat our own aging nation and threatened economy with new immigration, I think that's gonna help us on the global stage and also help all of our local communities. So that's the pitch I'd make.
No, absolutely. And why don't we just give our three amazing Latinas a big round of applause for their incredible work and advocacy. And yes, thank you, ladies, so much for all the incredible work you do. So thank you all for being a part of our panel.
Thank you to our moderator and panelists. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage another special guest, U.S. Representative from the 4th District of Nevada and Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let's give a round of applause to that incredible panel, to my colleague, Congressman Robert Garcia, and to the experts. I'm so honored to be with all of you today. I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford, and I'm proud to represent Nevada's 4th Congressional District. And as a son of an immigrant, my mother came to the United States from Trinidad when she was just 12 years old. Because of circumstances in our family, she became undocumented. Just recently went through becoming a legal permanent resident and finally earning her U.S. citizenship. So these are issues that affect all of our communities, and I want NALEO to know that I am your partner in this work. I also want to start by wishing everyone a happy Juneteenth, and to welcome all of you to Las Vegas, and to give a shout out to all of the hospitality workers, the food servers, the banquet workers, the cooks, the people who make Las Vegas strong. And it's great to be here with our HHS Secretary Becerra, as well as Tom Perez. I'm always honored to welcome them back to our district. Thank you also to Arturo Vargas for inviting me to speak with all of you today. Now, I know many of our local Nevada elected and appointed officials are here in the room because we have so many amazing leaders who are serving in public service of Latino descent here in the Silver State. So shout out to them as well. As I said, I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford, proud to represent the 4th Congressional District, and also I have the honor of serving as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. In that role, I've been laser focused on creating economic and wealth building opportunities for all people, but especially those who have been left out of opportunities for generations. On issues like this and many others like immigration and housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've partnered with my colleagues in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Nanette Barragan, as well as the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, led by Judy Chu. Since the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action, we have been fighting to defend diversity, equity, and inclusion in corporate America and in government agencies and federal programs. Programs like the Minority Business Development Agency and at the Small Business Administration, programs that are under attack. They are even suing organizations like the Fearless Fund, a venture capital firm that aims to provide access to capital to women of color entrepreneurs. Just last Wednesday, Senator J.D. Vance introduced the Dismantle DEI Act. It would eliminate all federal DEI programs and end DEI-related funding for agencies, contractors, organizations, and educational accreditation agencies that receive federal funding. Or you may have heard about the Smithsonian Museum being sued for their Latino Museum Studies internship program. Multicultural student centers are being closed on some campuses, and DE&I programs are being shuttered at some companies. But to be clear, when they come after DE&I, what they're really coming after is you and I. It's important that our communities stand together in these fights because we are all in this together. As I said before, today is Juneteenth, when we commemorate the last enslaved Americans who became aware of their freedom. It was June 19, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger ordered the final enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas, months after it had been signed, and weeks after the end of the American Civil War. But I also want to bring up the fact that it was Cinco de Mayo that may have also played an impact on the Civil War. The Battle of Puebla occurred on May 5th, 1862, when French soldiers were stopped from reaching Mexico City by Mexican forces led by General Ignacio Zaragoza. The invasion of Mexico was part of Napoleon III's plan to establish a new French presence in North America. At the time, the government of the United States was engaged in the American Civil War. Napoleon III intended to trade arms to the Confederacy in return for cotton. The defeat at Pueblo interfered with France's ability to carry out the trade. France had not recognized the Confederacy. No nation ever did, but was considering it. More than a year later, by the time the French gained control of the Mexican border with Texas in the summer of 1863, General Ulysses S. Grant had already won the Battle of Vicksburg, cutting off the Confederates' access to weapons from the West. The year-long delay of French invasion gave Abraham Lincoln's generals just enough time to win decisive Union victories before Napoleon could provide upgraded artillery and munitions to the Confederacy. So it's possible that Mexico's victory at the Battle of Puebla changed the course of American history. What if the Mexican army had not won that battle in 1862? We will never know. But what's important to know is that when we celebrate Cinco de Mayo or Juneteenth, we remember that all of our histories are intertwined. There are so many times when Black Latino coalitions or Latino AAPI or Latino LGBTQ+, and so many other intersections can come together to really affect change for a broader segment of the American people. Heroes like Martin Luther King, who supported Cesar Chavez, his work for farm workers' rights, or Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera leading the fight at the Stonewall riots. Our coalition has helped shape civil rights battles, and we must come together today to ensure that these battles are won and progress continues to be made. Together, we will protect the progress that we have made and continue to create pathways to economic opportunities and wealth building for all of our communities. I hope that you will enjoy the rest of your conference. I look forward to seeing you around Las Vegas. And don't worry, if you lose a little money on the tables, 50% of our state budget goes to fund education. So don't think it as a loss. Think about it as an investment in Nevada's children. Thank you all so much. Thank you to NALEO and all the tremendous work that you do.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage NALEO and NALEO Educational Fund CEO, Arturo Vargas.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Horsford, for joining us today, especially on this holiday that we're observing of Juneteenth. Thank you to our moderator for the panel, Congressman Robert Garcia, and our panelists. You all have heard that there have been some important developments from Washington, D.C. on immigration policy, and I'm very pleased to share with you that we have someone here to explain a little bit more about what these new policies are and perhaps some of the things that you need to know of how they may affect your constituents and your communities. So here to join us is a good friend of NALEO, a past member of the Department of Justice as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, a past cabinet member as Secretary of Labor. He is now the Senior Advisor and Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Please welcome the Honorable Thomas Perez.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Arturo, hey, is anyone here a baseball fan? Okay. Arturo Vargas, I'm from the DR. We got two sports in DR, baseball and politics, okay? Arturo Vargas is the Cal Ripken of nonprofit leaders. Thank you for your decades of service. The Iron Man of nonprofit leadership, leading us every single year. Thank you so much, Arturo. I'm so grateful for our friendship, and I'm so grateful to be back. I learned a little bit something when I was a trial lawyer at the Justice Department. most important lesson I learned was the mind can only absorb as much as the seat of the pants can endure. Y'all have been here for a while, so I want to cut to the chase. Folks, in my current capacity working with President Biden as a senior advisor, I have spent a significant amount of my time working on the border issues, not only along the border, but working with cities like New York, Chicago, Denver, other cities that have been impacted. And I've learned a lot, and I want to give you a few insights. I also want to talk just very briefly about our long history and build on some of the conversation that Congressman Garcia led about. Because point number one to remember, folks, is that our nation, since our founding, has had a proud bipartisan history of engaging immigration, understanding that we can be a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. That has been a long history. The party of Ronald Reagan, the party of George W. Bush, the first major immigration reform was passed by a guy named Abraham Lincoln. And so we heard before the panelists say, one of the things we have to do is take politics out of this. President Biden said again yesterday, I will work with anyone who will help us move the ball forward so that we can be a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. Everyone and anyone. And you know what? I come from an ecumenical family, youngest of 5. We got 3 Democrats, 1 independent, 1 Republican. And you know what? On this issue, we are united. And we are united in the same way that Ronald Reagan united the country on immigration, because he said, and I quote, he said this in the same room that the president sat yesterday, on the last day he was in office. Could have talked about anything. You know what he talked about? Immigrants. To quote Lin-Manuel, immigrants, we get the job done. That's not what he said, but this is what he said. We lead the world because unique among our nations, we draw our people and our strength from every country and corner of the world. And by doing so, we continuously renew and enrich our nation. If we ever closed the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost. Ronald Reagan, January 19th, 1989, in the East Room of the White House. Why do I bring this up? Because the panelists correctly said if we're going to get things done, we got to take politics out of this. 28 years ago, I was working in the United States for Senator Ted Kennedy when comprehensive immigration reform got passed. We had 90 amendments in the Judiciary Committee. I need my thumbs to count the number of party line votes. Everybody put country above party. Everybody knew about the economic case for immigrants. Everybody understood the moral imperative. Everybody understood that Lady Liberty is not a relic of the past. It represents who we are today. And so one piece of homework following up on this panel that I would ask you to do is to help us get to that point. I was in local government 20 years ago. You all can't print money in local government. You can't print money in state government. You got to get stuff done. I was going to use a different word, but I want to be nicer. And that is what we need to do. We need to build the case, because what history also teaches us is we have had moments where nativism has taken hold, whether it's the Know-Nothing movement of the 19th century, the movement that brought us the Chinese Exclusion Act. We've had moments where we saw our darker angels emerge. And we're in one of these moments right now. I refuse to believe that the party of Lincoln, the party of Reagan, the party of George W. Bush, and parenthetically, when we were fighting for comprehensive immigration reform in 1996, one of the governors who was most helpful was George W. Bush of Texas. Thank you, then Governor Bush, for your help. This was bipartisan. And we need everybody to step up. This is a bipartisan body. And I will say on behalf of President Biden, we are here to work with all of you, because we need to rekindle that spirit and remind folks that people like Javier Castro, who introduced the president yesterday. Javier was a dreamer. He came here when he was 3 or 4. He's now a nurse in Houston. He was in the front lines, one of the essential workers during COVID, saving lives, putting his own life at risk. And you know what? He is not poisoning the blood of our nation. He is part of our nation. And if you want to tell him to go home, his home is in Texas. His home, the only home he's known, has been in Texas. And that is why the president did what he did yesterday. Dreamers who are getting educated in this country, who have job offers. Why the heck would we educate someone, encourage them to get higher education, and then not give them a work permit? That's asinine. And that's why the president changed that yesterday. And so many people like Javier will benefit from the other executive action that the president took. Because if you have to go home to your country of origin to then reapply to come back, and you know what, it'll take years and you don't know if you will be successful, nobody is going to do that and separate their families. So what I want to make sure you know is that we're continuing to do everything we can within our powers. What you may not be aware of is that while we have taken actions to make the border more secure, executive actions, and by the way, border encounters are down 25% since the president took those actions, we have not shut the border down because we have created lawful pathways. The CBP One app, 14,000 people a day enter the country through that lawful pathway. It was designed to put order in the way that people come to the country. 30,000 people a month are coming in from the 4 countries of Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. 30,000 people a month apply and are accepted through that asylum program, that lawful pathway. We now have what we call safe mobility offices in Costa Rica, in other countries, because we're encouraging people, don't make the treacherous journey across the Darien Gap. Go to these safe mobility offices and make application there. We want to put the smugglers out of business, but what you have to understand is that the cartels that are controlling the trafficking are very dangerous people. They're very bad people, and they want to do harm. And so we're doing all of these things: diplomacy, lawful pathways, enforcement. All of these things are part of our strategy. And I've been working very, very closely with cities. And the people at the border, like Border Servants and the other nonprofits, they are doing God's work. Please support them. They are so, so helpful. And so yesterday was a seminal moment. But I will be the first, and the president will be the first to admit that there's no substitute for comprehensive immigration reform. But the politics of the moment won't permit it. And what frustrates the president as much as anything was we had a bipartisan agreement on the border security bill a few months ago. Bipartisan agreement. And Republicans said, no, we won't do that. Why? Because a certain someone called them and said, you can't give Joe Biden a victory. That's politics at its most cynical moment. Joe Biden doesn't look at things and say, who's going to get the victory? He looks at things and says, how do I help people? And yesterday, his executive action will help not only 500,000 folks who are married to someone who's a U.S. citizen, but when you add it up, it's probably about 2 million people when you add up the household. That's what it's all about, is helping people. So what I really would love you to do, if you could, we are now entering the implementation phase. You are all trusted allies in your communities. The Department of Homeland Security is going to continue to come out with guidance to get us through this program. When we did DACA in 2012, that program began implementation about 60 days after the announcement. And we are looking to follow that model moving forward. And we know that you are trusted allies. You are probably getting calls already from constituents. And we want to make sure we're working very, very closely with you because we can get this done. We will be, getting more and more guidance as the time nears. But what we want to do, and I had a meeting already this morning that Congressman Horsford so graciously organized, we learned and listened to advocates. They had a lot of questions, and they were all good questions. So we want to take in your good questions, because you can be really catalytic forces to make sure that every eligible person can apply. I'm very concerned about a notario industry that could come here and make promises to people that are promises they can't keep. So you are that trusted bridge that will help us move forward. That's what it's all about. But what we really need to do is to continue to build that will, to rebuild that will, because we are in a dark moment where people want to demonize immigrants as opposed to understanding what they do. And as your former labor secretary, I was also a trustee in the Social Security and Medicare trust funds. You know how we fund retirement for people? We have a ratio of employees to retirees. And guess what's happening across America right now? Our birth rates are flat. Our population's aging. More people retired, less people working. That's a problem, Houston. And that puts our Social Security and Medicare trust funds in jeopardy. And do you know how we've historically solved that problem? One word: immigrants. We get the job done. And so there's an economic imperative here. There's a moral imperative, and we need to keep families together. Please help us in this effort. Yesterday's announcement was indeed seminal, the most impactful announcement since DACA, but it will only succeed if we work together. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from you, working with you. Thank you to everybody in the inner cities who are working on these issues. We will continue that work together. Adelante.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Downey, California City Council member and Naleo's second Vice President, the Honorable Claudia Frometa.
Thank you to the Honorable Tom Perez for those remarks. And thank you to Congressman Garcia for leading such a timely and critical discussion with our panelists. Please thank them and give them a round of applause. I know we're a bit late, but before we all bolt out of here, we still need your support. Some of you have donated, but we are not where we need to be yet. Make a tax-deductible gift to Naleo Educational Fund today and join the Pearl Anniversary Circle. Please consider 30, 300, 3,000, whatever you can give. Now, if you haven't noticed, those of you that are still with us this afternoon, everyone in this room just got a text message. Perhaps you're getting it right now, directing you, check your phones, directing you to our donation page. So no one, absolutely no one, has an excuse not to make a contribution. Please make a donation to Naleo Educational Fund so that we can continue this critically important work, which includes amazing conferences like this one. You can also visit the registration desk right across from the flashing Naleo sign to make your donation. Staff with card readers will be standing by. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you visit the Naleo Service Project booth right outside the ballroom to pack school supplies and heat mitigation kits for this year's beneficiary, the Just One Project, which increases access to food, resources, and services to build a stronger, healthier, and more connected community in Las Vegas and beyond. While you're still here, head to the Service Project Tower and fill out a Post-it note answering the question, what is a cause that matters to you? So we can all reflect on the things that matter most to all of us. And before diving into this afternoon's breakout sessions, make sure to enjoy the Cafe and Confections networking opportunity located at the stations around the conference floor. Lastly, our third and final day of the conference is tomorrow, and it begins bright and early at 8:45. I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your second afternoon at NALEO's 41st conference.